Welcome to the 7th Annual FridaFest Women's Exhibit. My name is Maggie Castle. I'm the Assistant Director of Cultural Arts. And today we have Eva Williamson, who is the guest curator for the FridaFest, and will be introducing all the ladies in the gallery tonight. So um, without further ado, I give the floor to Eva.
I just want to say hi, everyone. I just want to give a big shout out to everyone here today. All of the artists who are participating. We've got Alexis Ramos, Ana de la Garza Dunn, Carla Hughes, Christina Correa. We've got Jessica Monroe, and we've got Josie Del Castillo. And just wanted to give a shout out to the City of Edinburgh Cultural Arts Department as well for making this possible. To all of the listeners out there and to all of our supporters. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And I just wanted to say that this event kicks off the FridaFest 2020. It's our 7th annual FridaFest for the City of Edinburgh. And we're just really happy to have everybody here today. This is a virtual event due to circumstances with COVID-19. So I think this is just really awesome that we get to be here even so, and pushing forward in the arts in our community and locally. So before we get into each of the artists, we'll have a chance to introduce themselves, and they will also be able to, answer some questions. This is a roundtable discussion. So we'd love to hear from the community. If you have any questions, please feel free to send those questions through Facebook, and we'll try to get them answered as best as we can during the live event. And anything that we can't get to, we'll be able to answer, later on and within time. So today we've come here together to share both a common and a diverse voice within our community. This is a celebration of women within our community, of women artists here in the Rio Grande Valley, coming here through the support of the City of Edinburgh. We are women. We have a voice. We are empowered, right? We use our talents, our skills, our knowledge, everything that we've worked so hard for, not just individually, but collectively, to be able to share that with you here today. I think that it's important just to think about Frida Kahlo and where she was coming from as an artist and challenging the social constructs at a time where it wasn't so popular to do so, where it was even more challenging to do so. And I just think that it's something that's so special that we get to be able to do this here today, and to be able to have each of the artists here today to just share with you a little bit about themselves and what their platform is, how they would like to help grow and further the arts community here in the Rio Grande Valley. And so let's go ahead and hear from the artists. So this is where we're just going to introduce the artists, and they'll talk about themselves and where they're coming from and a little bit more about themselves. So maybe if we could start off with Alexis Ramos, if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just go from there.
So, hi, I'm Alexis, obviously, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to get to talk a little bit about myself and my ongoing research, which is my work in particular is a journey into what it is to be a Latina in South Texas. Growing up on the fringe, we're too far north to be Mexican, but we're too far south to be Texan or American, and really breaking my work down into icons, the visual icons that we attach ourselves to. The aloe vera plant, it's such a substantial icon for Latinos, and its etymology is from the Arabic desert. And so really breaking down these icons that we're attached to and what that means, where we come from, not just the plants and what we eat and how we associate to that mestizo culture, but what does that mean, and who gets to define us as not just a woman, but who gets to define how we associate culturally and what that is. And for me, that's food. food at its core is something that crosses platforms globally. So tracking down ingredients and seeing how they've filtered and become part of that culture is really important to me. And so that's where my passion for my work and my food comes from, and how to illustrate that food in a way that people associate it to. So I'm super excited, and that's just a little bit about my work. And I love learning. I believe that there isn't anything that we can't do, especially as women, as artists, as innovators, as motivators. One of my things about being an artist is there's always something new for us to try, learn, adapt, manipulate. There isn't anything that can't be transversed, be that technology, be that a material. It can all be manipulated into something. And the greatest part about it is it can be turned into something amazing. At the end of the day, there's something tangible that you get to see from that labor. So I'm going to pass it on to Ava.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your words. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. Fellow foodie myself, always look forward to seeing your 3D sculptures and want to take a bite out of them. They're absolutely delicious looking. So Alexis does a lot of 3D sculptures that look like incredible cakes and baked goods. It looks like something that you would be able to serve at a grand party, at a wedding, at a big event. And I think bridging that into our cultural roots down here is beautiful. And thinking about aloe vera, and I see that behind you. It looks like this beautiful aloe vera crown almost. So thank you again for sharing all that with us. We're going to move on to our next artist, Christina Ann Correa. If you'd like to share a little bit about yourself.
I'd love to. Thank you, Eva. And I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Alexis just shared. I thought it was so beautiful because I can totally empathize as a woman, as a Tejana who grew up here in the Valley. It's hard to find your identity. And I think as an artist, that for me has been about finding my identity. There's so many layers to who we are, culturally, ethnically. Do you identify as American, Mexican American, Texan? I don't know. Sometimes it depends on how you're feeling in the day. But because there's so many different cultures and ethnicities and histories that all just kind of meld together down here. And when I think about my role as a woman, I think about being a mother, being a single mother, which I think is still very much a taboo subject in the Valley, being a sister, a daughter, a teacher, and wanting to carry on these traditions that have been passed down to me by my grandmothers, by my tias, by my mom, but also wanting to carve my own way, finding my own journey. Who am I? Where do I want to go? What do I want to leave behind for my son, or for my students, or for other members of the community? And I think over the last couple of years, as an artist and as an educator, I realized we've got to really start thinking about who we are as community in the art world down here in the Valley. Once upon a time, I used to think like, what do we represent as Valley artists, or what is our story? What is our style? I didn't really know. And I think that for a long time, we kind of kept our art inside in a closed space or in a gallery. We defined those as places to where our art needed to be, but the reality is not a lot of our community is going to be walking into a gallery or walking into a museum. They're going to be out in the open, in the community, you know, experiencing life downtown or at the pulga, or, you know, going to taqueria. And I think that if we can find ways to make our art more available to the public, if we can find ways to make it accessible and to invite others to be a part of our art or to help to have a conversation about what that art should be, then we really start to identify and define what our story is as Valley artists. I think that we're just now writing the story, and I think that there's so much possibility for what we can cultivate here in the Valley. And I mean, I definitely think as women in the Valley, we're a big part of that story, because we've come a long way in the last 50, 60 years. Even when I think about my mom's generation, there's so many things that we can do now that she couldn't do in the 70s or in the early 80s. And so I'm excited about this conversation. I'm excited to hear from fellow artists, because I think that's what unites us all, is this possibility, this hope for what could be, and this appreciation for our community in the Rio Grande Valley. It's colorful, it's dynamic, it's changing. It is not what the media in the rest of the country defines it. We are thriving, we are strong, we are amazing people. And I love that about us.
Well, I think that's well said. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas and your words with us. I think that it's important to remember that as women, each person down here, each woman artist shared with us today, everybody wears so many different hats. And we're breaking stereotypes and breaking what has been societal norms historically. And we're going to continue to do that over time. And, you know, I think that as time passes, we continue to peel back the layers of that aloe vera plant, the layers of that 10-15 onion, and just thinking about that and what that means to us down here, and being able to have a platform to share our voice. Let's go ahead and move to another artist here. Josie del Castillo, if you would like to maybe share with us next a little bit about yourself.
Hello, I'm Josie del Castillo. I recently graduated my MFA this past May from UTRGV. Right now, I guess it's a little bit like it's very hard. Like, I'm a very honest person. It's very hard right now with trying to be an artist, you know, during the pandemic, you know, trying to sustain yourself by just art of the pandemic. But like how Christina and Alexis have mentioned, we are very resilient, not only as artists, but as women who are constantly having like all these challenges, you know, people who see us less for just women, being a woman, a minority in this art world, right? One of the things that I'm looking forward to right now is being part of a residency, and it's supposed to be in New York, Chautauqua, New York, but it's unfortunately the pandemic. I'm doing it virtually through Zoom, and I'm seeing how in the Valley, like it's like a bubble, you know, but it's like it has its pros and it has its cons. We do have this beautiful mixture of our culture, of our food, of the people. But I think sometimes we get limited to the things that we have here, like the resources. And I wish there was more money going into the arts and everything, education, into galleries, into museums, into grants, you know, for local businesses. And being in that residency so far, and this week that I've been there, has opened me those eyes to see how many resources we lack down here. And I think that's something that hopefully in the future we can, you know, we can come together for that. And as the Valley, I always see the Valley as I don't see it as just Bronxville. I don't see it just Edinburgh. I don't see it as a McAllen. It shouldn't be divided. We should be as a whole thing as an RGV. And I think once we get over all those things that could set us back, we'll be continuing moving forward. I guess for my work, some of you guys might know my work. My work focuses on figurative work, mainly self-portraits and portraits of other people. And I focus on the themes of my Mexican-American upbringing, and as well as the body, the female body, how it's usually perceived, you know, in this ideal, typical form. And I try to break those barriers by painting myself nude. I'm a chubby girl, man. So it's challenging to paint myself. It's not easy. People think it's easy putting myself naked in paintings, but it's not. It's a challenge. So I think where I'm going with this is that we're always going to be facing challenges within our work, within our community, but it's by trying or attempting to break those barriers, that's the only way we're going to get better, you know. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Josie, for sharing your perspective and your words. I think that's important. First, identifying what the barriers are, what our challenges are, accepting that those exist, saying, hey, like those exist. It's a part of where we're at right now, but knowing that we have this voice and we have this power to challenge those barriers, and to further grow the arts down here in the Valley. I think it's part of our responsibility as artists and members of the community to try to find ways to share that with our community. And, you know, having FridaFest in person in the past years, and now being able to do this virtually where it's very accessible to a lot of different people, I think that's, you know, we're heading in the right direction. We're, you know, one foot in front of the other. We keep doing that, and we keep prevailing. We keep pushing forward. And so I think that that's just something that we can continue to do. Even when things seem a little bit challenging, we keep pushing forward. When we may not want to share particular aspects of ourselves within our art that we may not be so comfortable doing at first, but just all of the ways that we grow as artists when we do push ourselves forward more and challenge our own constructs. I think that that's something that I can see in everybody here today. Is just we're each doing that and trying to find new ways to grow. And without growth, we won't move forward in the things that we want, right? So I think that it's just interesting just thinking about how each one of us is going out into the community and sharing, whether, you know, sharing today through murals, through things that we can do step by step and just to not give up. And so having, you know, thinking about that and having a space to be able to share with people in the community, I'd like to maybe go over to Miss Carla Hughes, and she just is moving into a public space in downtown Harlingen. And so if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I just moved my studio after working for nearly 6 years by myself in my backyard. I'd been wanting to move out into the community for a bit now. The isolation was good for me as an artist to really figure out what it was I was most interested in researching and how I could share what I had to say, mostly very centered on the complexities of conversation, especially with the issues that face our American society today, and how many different perspectives we have here in our nation that other countries probably don't have to deal with just because they don't have the same kind of history that we do. So in the last years of researching that history and finding those perspectives that I certainly did not have access to as a child growing up down here because of our bubble, like Josie said, which is very real. the importance of the conversation became more and more and more in my mind, not just to where I wanted to illustrate how complex conversations were, but I want to start having them and facilitating them. And so I actually, in the last couple of years, switched focus from making sculpture into making more pottery. And that time in honing the craft of making a well-made pot, whether it's a coffee mug or a big serving dish, dinner plates. Dinner plates are incredibly difficult to make really well because you want them to be rugged and last a really long time, but you also want to have people touch them and not put them up in their china cabinet. You want them to use them. So to make a pot that people both cherish because it's handmade, but also want to use every day is just an amazing privilege to get to have dinner with folks. Every time they buy my work, I get to have dinner with them, basically. So I get to facilitate a conversation in a brand new way that only opened up to me as I started to really hone the craft of pottery. And I moved out of my backyard so that I could start inviting more people in. The ceramics community is very big on breaking bread. I mean, we make pots, you know, so sharing food and sharing space and sharing techniques and materials, like it all comes from the earth, and I take that very seriously. And unfortunately, it might be a while before I get to hold any workshops in my new studio, but there's plenty of space, and I'm really looking forward to the day where I can have community. We've left a space up towards the front that's just white, and as we get closer to being able to share space again, we'll have a gallery space up there. I'm looking forward to highlighting the artists in my community and outside, and really excited about what comes next. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Carla, for sharing with us, and congratulations on the new space. In time, people will be able to gather there and join in there. And again, it's in downtown Harlingen, near about a block away from Bandera Coffee and Procured Home Life Store, which is where Carla had a lot of her work, and still has some of her work there as well. And we're going to go ahead and move on to Ms. Jessica Monroe. If you'd like to share a little bit about yourself.
Hi. First of all, I love hearing everybody talk, and can you hear me? Can't tell. Okay. So my work is about the ecology of the Rio Grande Valley. A lot of it is based on growing up. My grandparents had a place out by Lasada. They had about 7 acres, and I spent all my weekends and all my summers. There was no air conditioning. We were outdoors in the trees the whole time. And I think that really influenced just my experience growing up. It's something that as I was on my artistic journey, I went away from and had to kind of come back to begrudgingly. I think to a very large extent, I was really scared that as a woman painting nature, I wouldn't be taken seriously. And it took a while for me to kind of overcome that and come to terms with the fact that no, especially now when you look at what's happening to our environment, just how important I think it is for us to understand what's happening, understand our impact on it. And the way I approach it is not to pull from it symbolically or kind of pick and choose what aspect of it I want, although of course, you know, everyone does that, but you know, I'm not as interested in just like pulling a portrait of a flower or a bird, or, you know, kind of separating it as a commodity. What I'm interested in is how all these tiny little pieces create the overall story. And it's more of an experiential kind of approach. So I'm influenced by, or very affected by, the abstract expressionists and the way you kind of encounter these big, just amazing art pieces that you get swallowed up in, and you just have this kind of reaction to. And so when I'm outdoors, I have the same sort of experience where I'm, there becomes this real, your ego kind of lets go, and it's not just about you. You're this small part of a much larger story, and it's all moving and it's all dynamic, and it's a very meditative kind of experience. And going to this space and connecting to it time and time again, for me, it's very grounding. It's very spiritual. And then over the past, one of the things that's kind of neat about being in this group and having this conversation, which, as many of the other artists talked about, growing up here and being an artist here, there's this real isolation, I think, that I feel oftentimes, and this kind of lack of resources. And I felt more support, I think, when I was in places like New York or Chicago working. And so there's a challenge there. But one of the things that kind of on my own I've been thinking about is just the feminine voice, which I think can be utilized by men and women. But this feminine voice, I think, is very present in the natural world. It's this voice of subtlety. And I think historically that voice has just been overpowered and seen as not as strong. And so kind of coming into a place where just kind of trusting that there's a value to that voice, and kind of living it and not being afraid to be like, well, this is what I'm doing, And I think it's interesting. It's an idea that isn't fully formed, but I see that feminine voice in industries of women global leaders, and everything from women being able to tell their story about assault and objectification, and finally being given some validity. And so I see it in around the world in different kind of interesting places. And anyway, I think that's kind of interesting. So that's me. That's what I'm working on.
Thank you for sharing, Jessica. Appreciate your words, appreciate your ideas that you're sharing with us. And we've got our last artist to introduce herself. This is Ana de la Garza Dunn, and coming in from Brownsville, I believe. If you'd like to take a little bit of time to introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to questions from there.
I grew up in, I was raised and I grew up I was born in Brownsville, but I grew up in Matamoros, in Matamoros, Mexico. So it has been a huge challenge for me since I did all my elementary school and my high school in Matamoros. When I first got here at the university, I was like completely lost. I didn't know at the time what I wanted to do. I knew that art was a very strong thing for me that I needed to study, to learn more about it, and to be guided by someone. So I started with some basics at the beginning, but I started going more to the art building all the time. So I would just take one math class and then I would go back. So I started taking classes with a very good instructor that he passed away about probably 5 years ago. I did learn a lot. He did pressure me. I did struggle, but I think that pressure that I had, it was all experiences, and I was able to see things differently and learn new things. I lived all my life in Matamoros, most of it. I started living here like around age 25, more or less. And I would say about 20 years ago. And a lot of my artwork does reflect the struggles that I've gone through, being raised in Mexico and then living in the United States. Even though it's almost, we're like together, it's still completely different. I mean, that by the time you cross the bridge, everything is different. So yes, I did struggle, and a lot of my art represents all those struggles. I do not, some of my work, it's surreal. Sometimes I want to make it real, but my struggles are always hidden. Like, I don't want to express like the true, the true meaning of some of my artwork, because it's a very, very strong sentiment deep inside. I have done a couple of, well, more than a couple exhibits around Matamoros, Brownsville. I do sell my artwork a lot. I have a lot of clients who do look for me for, I like the decorating houses and, you know, challenging myself with the colors and the paintings that I do. And that's one thing that I like and that I've been able to accomplish to 100% here in Brownsville. I am a single parent as well as some of you, and again, most of my artwork reflects it. There's a lot of clients or people or some friend of mine that are able to describe what's going on, especially the ones that know me. So it is amazing when they describe my art to me. I am in the process of growing my business. We are going to be moving soon. Right now, I'm at my studio where I've been teaching for the past 14 years private art lessons to people in need of healing, mainly students that have autism, children that parents get divorced. So I offer them that space here in Brownsville in Artemis Plaza by Central Boulevard a long time ago. And this has been my strength. And all of this came because of being a single parent. I knew I needed to provide for my family. So I had to use my talent for the community. And it has helped me a lot. And I've been happy here in Brownsville. Are very nice. I've done a lot of things. I still think and believe that I still need to do and grow more. My biggest accomplishment is watching my students overcome their frustrations, just like I did a long time ago. So like I said, right now I'm here. I couldn't be at home because there were too many distractions. I don't have a very good connection at the moment. And but maybe in about a month or so, we're going to be moving next to Dance Center by Price, and we're going to have our gallery. It is very uncomfortable for me to have all of my artwork for security reasons at my house and having my clients to go visit me there. It's okay, I don't mind, but it's been a struggle because it's like your space. And so I have to pull all these artworks from downstairs, upstairs, downstairs, and it's been hard. But now we're gonna, like I said, I have this new opportunity to open a gallery. I will be taking other artists' work. Of course, 25% of all sales is gonna stay at the gallery. And in the back, I'm gonna still have my classes to keep on providing healing to all the people that needs it. Because I was one of them. So yes, this is how I started. I do come, I was raised in Mexico. I was born in Brownsville, and I've challenged a lot of difficulties throughout this stage in my life.
All right, thank you, Anna, for sharing with us. Thank you for your words and your thoughts, and a little bit about yourself. And I think about, what you're sharing. You've been building your business and building yourself as an artist, and just, sharing that with the community. Being able to do that is just, so valuable and important to be able to further grow our community, and to further share with us. So thank you, Anna, for sharing with us. And then I would just like to say, if anybody has just hopped on from our community, from our local community, welcome once again to our live gallery talk here, to our open discussion. And I just want to welcome you here today from anybody from our local community who's joined us. So we're going to move into our questions, and please, artists, feel free to, I'm going to ask it open. Please feel free, if you have something that you would like to contribute to the question, please feel free to answer. And, we'll just go through there, and we may not have time for all of the questions, but we'll go from there and see what you guys have to say. I think it's just really great that we're all here together today, once again. So when I think about art, I think about so many different aspects, and a lot of what you shared today, and where I'm at myself. I'm just thankful that I'm here as a guest curator, and thinking about my own constructs and struggles that, as an artist, as an art teacher, and some of the things that I forget about that I have, being partially blind. I forget that I'm partially blind because I've had people who say, hey, you're going to have to figure out how to make it in this world, and figure out how to drive and see, and just do all the things that you might want to do. So if you haven't had that voice, that person or group of people to push you, I hope today during this talk that you feel inspired from each other, from our artists here today, to push forward into something that it is that you might want to do yourself. So with our question here, one of my first memories of creating art, and it may not exactly have been art in a formal sense, but it was just a painting, was being about 3 or 4 years old and learning how to paint the outside of our house in Bruni, Texas, a small town of about 200 people, with my mom, and just learning how to put paint on a paintbrush and brushing back and forth. So I'd like to just ask you guys here today, what is your first memory of creating art? How did that impact you? How did it make you feel? How did it get you to where you are right now, being an artist in our community?
I'll start. So my first memories of learning about art and making about art are tied to the sewing machine. My mom used to sew us the most beautiful clothes when we were little. And I knew that if I heard the sewing machine going, there was going to be something beautiful waiting for us in the morning that we could wear to school or we can wear to church. And the same thing is true of my grandmother's. My dad's mom had a quilting bee, and all of these viejitas would come over and they'd sit around her dining room table and they'd sit there and they'd sew by hand. And when I was maybe about 4 years old, that same grandmother taught me how to embroider. And I remember sitting there with the embroidery hoop, and she would make me go back and take out my stitches because everything had to be just so. Everything had to be really neat. Or your stitches had to be just the right size, not too long, not too short. And then my mom's mom would make, like, if you could imagine it and you could describe it to her, she could make these like beautiful decorations and floral arrangements, and she would decorate the church. And I remember seeing all of the things she would work so hard on with her sewing machine. And then we go and she would install it at mass. And then at Sunday, I remember feeling such immense pride, like, my grandma made that, and look at how beautiful this church space looks, and thinking like, I want to do that. And I'm so thankful that my mom was really patient with all of us growing up, because she gave us this space. She said, here, make your Barbie some clothes. We would take like toilet paper, tissue paper. We'd like try to sew into an old scrap of something. And we'd sit there and we would just take those basic skills. And, you know, it's like, hey, if mom can make something beautiful, I can too. If my grandmas can like come together and create these usable, like beautiful items for other people, then maybe I can too. And I think that was the first time in my life when I realized like art gives you the tools that you need to be able to give back to others, to create something that could be usable and beautiful and like so meaningful at the same time.
Christina, I love the way you talk about that. I have very similar memories. And to this day, hearing a sewing machine is like the most beautiful sound in the world to me, you know, because my grandma was always sewing out there in Lasada in the ranch house, and I would play with her buttons, and she would give us needles at like 3 years old, and I would take the napkin and make little, you know, things for my dolls. And I think growing up, one of the things I noticed as a teacher, this fear that my students will have on not wanting to make anything because they don't want it to be, they want it so badly to come out right, you know. But I think when you grow up with everyone just creating, and this is just part of the norm, this is part of what just happens, there, you know, that fear is like, you know, what's the worst that can happen? You know, you just kind of do it. It's just part of like eating. It's part of like, you know, it's just what you do. And unfortunately, I was hopeless on the sewing machine and embroidery and crochet and all that kind of stuff. But then when I did go into a painting class when I was 6, I have such a clear memory of the very first painting I did. And I can remember painting the yucca and manipulating the brush and getting that point, you know, for the spikes, and this incredible joy. I mean, I have such a clear memory, and it was so long ago, and I can look at these old paintings through different parts of my life, and I have such, I think it really kind of activates a part of your brain tied to memory, where, you know, I can remember where I was in my life, how I was feeling, you know. I think there's something just chemical, you know, about what happens through that process that that kind of starts off very early on for me.
So again, the sewing thing, the button tins, they're so, there's like a place it takes you, you know. I grew up in the same thing, and my first memory, I used to just watch. I was a very quiet kid, and I didn't really like playing with my cousins because they liked playing outside. So I would just sit and watch my grandma for hours, whether it was making curtains or pillowcases or organizing the button tin to the buttons that were for the boys' stuff, and then the fancy buttons that would only go on church clothes, because those are the buttons that weren't allowed to be into Barbie clothes. But I learned early on that cooking was something big. And when Carla was talking about the dinner set, and that being a part of the home and it being a part of something you share, we had a tradition in my house where you would send the neighbor a plate of food, and that plate wasn't meant to come back to you. So it was like there was a missing part of your dinner set that would keep getting shared with other people. And so when my family figured out that I could bake or decorate cakes, all of a sudden I became the cake person. And so it was like, it would be my cake on the plate that would go missing. And so, you know, my grandma would take whatever plate from the china cabinet that she decided was going to be the plate that was going to leave the house and never come back, or maybe it would come back one day, but it was never to be returned empty-handed. And to this day, that's something that really sticks with me. And to me, food was an art. It, you know, it felt like my grandma was some kind of magician or alchemist in the kitchen, just taking herbs from the garden or throwing things in a pan, and then not just feeding us and all of, you know, the cousins and the children and herself, but also taking a minute to feed one of the neighbors or someone that may not have dinner that evening, or just sending a plate to, you know, whichever of the unlocked doors on our street was unlocked. Somebody was going to find a plate somewhere in their kitchen. And to this day, the smell of garlic and onion in the kitchen, and the sound of buttons in a metal cookie tin, those tins from the holidays, just the moment I hear buttons in a metal tin, I think of my grandma. And it's to me, that was art. To me, it was, you know, looking at the different designs on a plate, and, you know, if it was a glass plate, I would just, you know, run my fingers across the back of these old tiara plates and wondering, you know, how was this made? What, you know, how did it get the color, you know? And then being a bit nerdy and starting to research about, you know, wooden molds for glass tiara casting and crystalline glass. So, but yeah, it's interesting. It all starts at home somewhere in some form.
My grandmother also, but she would go get the greenware from the little, there's one in Edinburgh called Bud's Muds, and there was one here in Harlingen called the Poorhouse. And I don't remember what the name of the place was when I was a kid, but we would go in and there would just be racks and racks and racks of this really delicate, beautiful statuary. And my grandmother always got big pictures. She liked to do those like old-fashioned country sets that had a big bowl and a big pitcher. And back in the olden days, that's how ladies would wash their hair in their bedroom, was with these things. And, you know, it was purely decorative. She did very little that was actually to be used, but walking in and seeing those shelves full of this beautiful stuff. And, you know, she always so generous, pick out two, because one might break. So you get to pick out two. And sitting at the kitchen table and painting those pieces with her, you know, I was 3 or 4 when we started doing that together, and baking, and also with the embroidery. I have some of her embroidery from when I was a child. I have one of her little mugs that she made for me in the early 80s. Yeah, it definitely all started at home, and it's an effort to continue to build home, and to build home not just in the home that I've built with my husband and my children, but also in the greater world, because we're always looking for a space. I don't know, I've always felt like I didn't quite fit into any of the groups or communities that were around me growing up. But at my grandmother's dining room table with those ceramics, all the rest of that disappeared. And I'm really grateful. And I love that we all have very similar stories, or at least the ones who have shared their stories so far. It's pretty great.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I think it's just further reiterates just how magical art and creating can be, and what our historical past is, and how we started with everything. And I think that it goes forward to where we're moving towards, or where we might want to move towards, or, you know, where somebody who's watching or can watch later, if they can't watch right now, where they might gain something from what each one of you guys have said, and thinking about what they might want to share, you know, what their emotions and feelings are, and memories are of growing up, of themselves. And I think that it's just, we are getting closer towards the end of the time this hour is moving by very fast. But I think that, you know, as we were wrapping up and we're kind of thinking about everything that we've shared today, I hope that each one of you just thinks about, you know, your memories, who you are, and what you'd like to explore, continue to explore, continue to push yourself, because we're only limited by what we choose to limit ourselves by. And I think that, you know, if there's something that you would like to share with other women out in the community, whether they're artists or not, or maybe some of our young artists, what would be something that you would like to share with them as a female artist here in the Rio Grande Valley? What would you say? You know, what would you like to share potentially that will help, you know, be a positive message of some sort to make art, to create, whether it's creating something that's a fine art, visual art, or maybe it's another form and fashion of creating?
I think I'll add something to that. Especially as an emerging artist, it's in a community that sometimes it's very supportive, and sometimes we get discouraged, you know, because it's really hard being an artist in a very poor community. You know, where jobs are very, very small, very limited, and very competitive as well. So for any young lady or, you know, student, or, you know, they're entering college and they feel discouraged for the resources or the support system that they lack, I think it's like, I recommend finding that support system from your friends, from your professors, from your community, or looking up to a local artist or another artist from outside the valley and look at them as mentors. You know, I think it's important to have guidance, doesn't matter where it's coming from, and to be resilient and ambitious, you know, because everybody here has shown that they work really hard to get to where they're at. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Like, it's hard, you know, especially as a woman artist here. I believe hard work pays off. That's as simple as it sounds. If you want it, go get it. And there's going to be bumps in the road. You're going to get, you know, not what you want, but if you're continuous and your ambition, you know, you'll get somewhere. Talking from my personal experience and from everybody else is where, you know, everybody sounds like they're doing great.
So I think to add to what Josie just said, there's also no wrong way. I know a lot of people, we constantly measure ourselves up against the status quo of other artists. And we're constantly putting these pedestals or these criterias, like, I have to do this by this, you know, deadlines are great, you know, especially if you're, you know, I'm a student, I also have to work because, you know, I'm paying my own way through school. But when you're also working, you're a single mom, you've got checkbooks to balance, a dream to push towards. But then, you know, sometimes you're just making stuff for yourself. And I think that's one thing that we lose when we're fighting that fight to reach that professional, that academic echelon that we feel we need to maybe reach to be able to compete. You know, but at the end of the day, it's for me, art is about artists helping artists. You know, you may not live in a community where the community can help finance you, but if you create a community, a family within that community of artists connecting, helping each other, teaching each other techniques that, you know, eventually that knowledge gets shared with, you know, in a way that people never thought they could have that knowledge. And I love the ability to share and just give it away. It's not meant to be put in a place so far away that no one has access to it, you know, and it should be just there. It should be attainable and reachable. And, you know, if we each take responsibility for sharing just a little piece of ourselves, then we are that family, we are that community, and we are the matriarchs of what we know, just like our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers. Those of you that can embroider, you took that and you're passing that on. Those of you that know how to run a sewing machine because grandma made you learn how to make pillowcases, you get to pass that on to someone. My niece got to dress up as Johnny Appleseed because I know how to make a vest because grandma taught me how to sew. And I know how to make a carrot cake, and I don't mind teaching that to someone, or painting or welding. It's knowledge, and knowledge should be shared. And I think the only way to grow the arts, especially in South Texas, is even if we don't have funding, 3 people together are more of a force than one person with one dream. And if you reach out, somebody will help catch you and help listen. And I think that can be huge, that can be big, especially in the great big scary world that we live in.
I think that if I could just share one bit of advice, it's all about perspective. And I'll keep it quick because I know we're running out of time, but I remember being young and a teenager and having grown up here and thinking to myself, I just want to get out of the valley. I want to get out of the valley and I never want to come back. And now that I've been back for almost 15 years, I love it here because I think about it as a place of perspective, almost like Hardy lost. The coffee needs to kick in a little more. All about possibility. If there is not a bridge, find a way to make one. If that road doesn't get you where you want to go, okay, maybe it's time to lay out another road. But you're only limited by the thoughts and the ideas that are within your own head. And I think that if you can learn to see beyond that, and you can learn to harness what's around you to create the world that you want to have, then you're going to find everything that you need wherever you are, whether it's here in the Valley or New York City or in South America, who knows? But you're going to make for yourself what you see in the world around you. So at the end of the day, choose the perspective that shows you how you can have what you want for yourself in the world around you, no matter where you are.
To kind of reiterate what a lot of I'm hearing, I really agree with a lot of those things, and bringing it back to just, being a woman. I think when you think about, what you consider success and the status quo and what is like what you're supposed to attain, to a very large extent, those have been presented by a very male-dominated perspective and a very male-dominated industry, historically, And so I think finding or just having faith in that, in your own voice, and not needing to compete based on criteria set by somebody else. And just personally right now, I'm in my 3rd trimester and I'm exhausted all the time. I have no childcare and I'm living with the 4-year-olds. Like, that impacts what I can do, and letting go of what I think I'm supposed to be doing with my art or what I'm supposed to be doing with my career. I think just living this life and really having faith, because in the value of that, because when I had my first son, or my first child, my son, it completely changed my art in just amazing, beautiful, rich ways, and just, I think, seeing the value of that. And, someone once told me there's a difference between saying I have a voice and I have a right to be here, and just saying I have a voice. And I think instead of trying to be, to prove your worth, and to prove your point, just what I love is in this conversation, I'm just hearing the voices that are just so beautiful and so strong and so interesting to me, and I think really believing in the strength of that is so powerful.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing that. I think that for me, it's very easy to identify with each aspect of what you guys were talking about. And I think that it's just important to remember that no one person has the same path or journey as another person. And it's not linear. There's no formula that says you must do this, this, and this to get this outcome. Some things, yes, might help. But I think that for each person, it just looks so different. And our backgrounds are all just so different. And I think that's what's so awesome, that we can bring all that together here. And to take that voice, each one of your voices here today, just being able to listen to everything that you shared with us today is just, it's part of our goal to further empower others. So here today, you are empowered women, and hopefully you empower other women. So I think that that's exciting, it's important, and I really want to thank each one of you for being here today and being vulnerable, sharing a part of who you are, sharing your art. And I would like to also let the community know that if we go to the Edinburgh Cultural Arts website, edinburgharts.com/women's-exhibit, you'll be able to see everybody's artwork in a virtual gallery online. And we're going to go ahead and share that with you on screen right here. This is just to get a little bit more to know about each one of our artists here today: Alexis, Anna, Carla, Christina, Jessica, and Josie. And you can read a little bit more about them, and then you can also click through. It's very exciting to click through some images of their artwork, whether they're 2D, which is flat art, or 3D, which is sculptural art. And so I think it's just exciting to be able to have this ability to do that. So if you choose to go to that website, you'll be able to see a little bit more about each one of the artists. And I think that this is just, it's fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'd like to open the floor for any questions from our community and our watchers, our viewers right now. If there are any questions at all that you would like to share with us. Okay, and I'm just getting a message here. I know everybody has busy schedules and we all have our individual lives going on, but we can certainly run a little bit longer if you guys would like to do so. I know I'm putting everybody here on the spot, but we've got some time. And if we'd like to run a little bit longer, we can do that. And we can also wrap things up with where we're at.
I unfortunately have another meeting for the residency at 4:30, but it was very nice hearing you guys and everybody's background. Very fortunate to be part of the FridaFest 2020. So I'll be leaving, but I mean, I'll watch it later when it's over. Thank you.
Thanks, Josie, and good luck with your residency. Josie's in a residency out of Chautauqua, and so it's an artist residency up in New York, I believe. Is that correct? Awesome. So good luck with that and congratulations. And so right now, you know, we've got our life experiences that we've kind of gone through. I think maybe if we could, we don't have any questions from the public at this time. We do have some messages from our public. I would just like to recognize some of those that have come through from Ms. Paulina Sosa. You know, just saying thank you all for sharing your voice, sharing a little bit about yourself, and you know, your beliefs and your challenges and different parts about you and about your artwork. I'd also like to thank Glenda Walker. Thank you for sharing your comments as well. And thank you everyone for your support. I know that from here, this is not the finality of where we are as artists in our sharing our art in our community. So I think that maybe this is just exciting. Sounds like maybe we might want to do something a little bit later on and continue to build arts within our community. And I'd just like to say thank you to each one of you who's here right now today. And so I think we can unanimously, everybody's still on. So let's go ahead and run into another question or so. And if you have to leave, you've got other obligations, it's going to our artists, you know, please feel free to do what you can do. All of it is really great in what you're doing so far. So I think in leading into maybe looking at some of our art that's on the website in the virtual gallery, I think that that might be nice to share that screen and go from there to see if we can look at some of your art and how, you know, maybe you moved into making your art. We've talked a little bit about that. You've shared with the community about that. So as a woman, we've talked about what empowers you to make art. You know, what was our first memory? What are some of the social constructs that you guys have seen? We shared a positive message to others in the arts, and sorry, I'm reading the messages here on the side as well. And I'd also like to say, you know, what, as a woman, what do you feel is the most important aspect about your art? What is the most important aspect of that you have noticed how the arts have changed in about the last 5 to 10 years in this area? What do you hope to see in the future?
I think we're really starting to see, oh, I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, I think we're really starting to see a lot more diversity and a lot more support of unique voices down here in the Valley. I know one of the things that I personally have struggled with as an artist is, you know, a lot of times I think we feel like, and it might not be true, that people want to see very photorealistic, like super beautiful, hyper realistic work. And I love making that. It's great. But I also recognize that there are so many other methods for making art. And I think that as we have conversations with people, as we show our work more, there are a lot more members of the community who are loving, you know, all of the different ways in which we're producing and accepting it as great art and is accepting it as part of our community voice. I think that we're going from seeing a very like maybe single-minded perception of what art should be to a really larger embracement of what could be art and what we want to see as art and what people perceive as valuable within the community and the art landscape.
So for me, 5 to 10 years from now, one of the things I'd like to see is something that I got to experience in Pennsylvania. It's called the Banana Factory, and it is it's a community arts center with built-in residencies, not just for local artists, but for just anybody that's interested in experiencing art in a different demographic. You know, like if we want to experience a different demographic and really see how to grow as an artist, you know, New York or California, we don't really have an art residency program down here to help showcase the amazing landscape. And there's just so much talent down here. And it also to give artists a place to commune and work and, like I said, pass on that knowledge. And that's definitely something that I see us working to and maybe collaborating, grant writing together, seeing if we can get, you know, something down here. Because I think it would be a beautiful way to not just draw artists from the state of Texas, but to help draw artists from all over. You know, Josie's doing her residency in Chautauqua, and that is a beautiful experience. And I would like to see what would happen in the future with that down here. There's just so much talent and so much to draw from. You know, the ecology, the people, the culture, the community, the border culture, women's culture, you know, I think that would be something to work towards.
Okay, thank you guys for sharing. I think that that's goals that we can definitely work towards. Continuing to build the arts community down here, continuing to have cultural arts centers throughout the valley that are accessible to, you know, maybe more throughout the valley. We've got some different ends of the valley. We've got our, you know, smaller hubs that we're continuing to build, but having an artist residency or two down here. I know that there's one that runs out of South Padre, and there might be a few more that I'm unaware of, but continuing to build that and to have artists come in from all over down here, and we're sending ourselves out into the world. So maybe we can have a cross-pollination going on there as well. So I think that would be great. One of the questions that came in from Michael Parson asked on Facebook comments, how has the restrictions of COVID affected the production of your work, if it's affected it at all?
Well, it hasn't, at least for me, it hasn't really affected production of work, although I'm currently sitting on a lot of work that would normally go out to market. I was really excited. I got accepted into a juried market in Austin, and it got canceled. And then I know a lot of folks that are keeping their fingers crossed that Texas Clay Fest is going to continue happening this year. That's a really big event in Central Texas where potters and sculptors from all over Texas who work in clay go to show and do demos. It's a really great event, but we don't know if it's going to happen right now. And the smaller markets, Harlingen Art Night has been canceled kind of indefinitely. And it's hurtful to the pocketbook and to the community. I really enjoy my time alone in the studio. I get a lot of work done. I cherish that time, but I have to balance it with time out in the community where I go and talk about work and show people work and learn about their new work. And that has come to a grinding halt in my world, at least. And I miss it. I miss it a lot. The COVID-19 restrictions have been really hard to deal with as an artist.
For me, it's been childcare. So I have a 4-year-old, and he was in this really wonderful program, and I would drop him off and see what he was learning and feel so good that, you know, he was in this really great place. He was with his friends, and I could come and really focus on my work. And it's been interesting learning how to work with him in my space. I think in some ways it's created some really very interesting insights. It's developed good skills for both of us. You know, I'm not going to say it's all bad, but it's definitely changed. And, you know, I had this plan of what I was going to get accomplished before my second kid was born. And then, you know, I was planning on, you know, taking just a regular maternity leave and then having somebody come in so that, you know, I could keep working from home and have somebody stay with the baby, and all that's out the window. And just, you know, seeing my husband, he gets to continue to, he was even working from home for a long time, but he would come and disappear into his workspace, and he was working from like 8 in the morning until a lot of times like 7:30 at night, because his work went crazy with COVID. But he felt like his career got to keep moving forward. You know, he got to keep like feeling really productive with his day. And my days turned into cleaning, childcare. I did a lot of baking, which I've enjoyed, you know. I mean, it's just, but I've had to really stop moving forward, you know, in this plan I had to be able to have my kids taken care of so that I could get this work done, which is so essential to my my feeling of self-worth, you know, to a very large extent, and also just my emotional health. It's really, really important for me to paint regularly. You know, I think this is probably pretty common for creative people, but if I'm not working, like, you're an artist in the doing, you know, in the creation, and when I'm not, something's really wrong, you know, and I really, really struggle with that. And then also I've been, which I probably shouldn't, I had to delete Facebook from my phone because I got too overwhelmed. But just listening to the news stories, I mean, there's so many mornings that I'm in the studio trying to get some work in before, you know, the rest of the house wakes up, and I'm listening to the news and I'm listening to the stories, and I'm just crying by, you know, the struggles that our country's facing right now. And it's just, I think it's very emotional, and I think that can be very draining, you know, and the art becomes a real comfort, you know, during that time. But it's totally turned on its head. My schedule is it's not regular, and for me, having a regular schedule to work, having that time carved out, is really essential. It's very hard to wake up before a toddler. He's up by 6:30, and I'm done, you know. So yeah, it's been a big change.
I know for me, schedule is a big thing. I set my own rules, and I have to have, you know, this work and this exploration, and then I have to stop and do the writing that accompanies that piece so that I don't, you know, the notes and the emotions and all the things that come along with that. And so before this, it was, you know, working on a 8.5 foot wooden spoon sculpture, you know, so to shift from building sculptures and 3D, I had to give myself permission to, you don't have to master this other medium, but you're allowed to explore it. So working on canvas or building smaller canvases, things that I could manage on a, you know, 48-inch round dining room table, and giving myself permission to ruin that dining room table since I no longer have control of this space, and explore different mediums. And so I started shifting into glass pieces and icons and just scaling things down a little bit and giving myself permission that they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be a finished piece, but keep making. Don't stop making, because, you know, you have to learn how to buy supplies. We're so used to the immediacy of, I need a bucket of gesso, or I need this. You know, I was used to driving up to San Antonio to go get some Longhorn white so that I could just play with clay or pigments. And then I couldn't drive to San Antonio to go get a pallet's worth of clay, and can't mix plaster in the kitchen because, well, I eat there. So giving myself permission to explore different types of art. And it ended up leading to my discovery of how to translate food and culture into just its basic icons, and learning that it's okay to shift. Doesn't mean turning away from something. It just means, let me take a break from this and take a step back and try something else and do that for a little while. But and learning that you have to make a new schedule and finding that balance.
In my case, COVID hasn't stopped me being productive with my work at home. I still have my clients. I still have 2-3 invoices that I need to turn in to my clients of how much it's going to cost for me to do their paintings. But it has made a big difference in my art school. with my students. I'm only taking 6 students per class right now for summer, and it has affected me a lot. And not personally me, because what I do it with a kind heart for my students so they can express themselves, because like I said, some of them have so many issues going on with the school, with homework, with the Zooming, with the teachers, and it's also as to them as frustrating as it is for me. So it has. I did. This two last. I do every year. I do a 5-week summer art camp, and this is my fifth week, and this one was like the heaviest. Everybody wanted to. I mean, everybody's so desperate to get out of home, including the children, that they wanted that space, and it has affected me so much because I can't have too many here, just for taking precautions. I mean, I can get 10, but it's not gonna look good. So yeah, that's in my case, that's how it has affected me. Not personally, but more to like my students and my art school. Hopefully it'll get better soon.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. We're coming more so to a little bit of a close here. And so I wanted to thank each one of you for your time here today. And thank you to everybody who's watching and for your comments. I finally figured out how to get to those. Not the best with technology for myself here, but it's okay. I'll continue to learn and grow and work on that and become a technology master. But I think it's just important to know that even with these challenges that we're facing right now during COVID-19 is that, as humans, we are able to, it's in our programming and our genetics to adapt and to continue to adapt as we need to these changes. And I know that each one of us is going to figure out how that works best for us. And, I wish that, everything could go back to some sort of before COVID-19 wasn't perfect. There's still lots of changes that we need in our society in general. But I think that we have this power, we have this ability to continue writing what it is that we want to see for ourselves. And so I just, want to say thank you again to each one of you who's here today, and really appreciate your time, your efforts, your talents, your voices, each one of you. And, as artists here in our community, we'll continue working towards further building opportunities that we can share with others. And I think that that's just being able to do that and having that platform is just a big goal of mine, and it sounds like it's a big goal of each one of yours. I think that's just seems to jive really well. I'd like to just thank Jessica, Alexis, Anna, Carla, and also thanking Christina and Josie. They had to hop off. They've got some other things going on. And as well, just want to thank our listeners and wanted to thank our Edinburgh Cultural Arts Department